it was at that stage that I thought, maybe I could do this for a living instead of sitting in a factory doing the same movements day in, day out, and not really gaining much reward for it. And it was at that point that I said to Helen, I think I'm going to do it today. And she went, right, get in there and go for it. And I walked into the office and I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to be a singer. And I remember the manager's face, he sort of like looked at me as if to say, Pillock, get out. In the early stages, we really did struggle. I mean, paw's probably not the right word. It was beans on toast paw, and you know, it was brown sauce was a treat. It was a delicacy at the time to us, and you know, I look back on those days and I think.
Because you're married then, aren't you? Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, you know, is the light at the end of the tunnel?
Was there any time when you thought you were going to give up?
There were times on evenings where, you know, I'd feel like with a particular audience that I was banging my head against a brick wall, and I'd be on stage thinking, what the bloody hell am I doing in here? Why am I wasting my time? And then you get your paycheck at the end of the night. And what I got used to doing sometimes, which was probably wrong, was maybe switching off to an audience. It was only later on, maybe after about 2 or 3 years, that I began to think, no, you're not going to beat me. You're going to listen, I'm going to bring you round. Instead of maybe doing one song and they all go, maybe think, right, the next song, you know, I'm going to do, and then in between, I'm going to make a few cracks. I'm going to single somebody out in the audience. I'm going to pick on them, get to know them, get to know the name, become, I suppose, friendly with them. And then every time you introduce this person, the audience thinks, oh, he's speaking to Albert, you know. And you bring him round that way because he's one of us, he knows us, he knows Albert, and it's strange, it worked.
What were you singing? What was your...
It was a mixture of sort of pop ballads and sort of maybe the odd bit of rock and roll, because everybody, for some reason, when you're in a pub or a club environment, seems to want these boppy, rock and roll, Elvis, Buddy Holly type songs. So there was no classical influence at that particular time whatsoever until I introduced Michael Ball's Love Changes Everything from Aspects of Love. And that went down incredibly well. But in the pubs...
Who was backing you? What was your backing group?
There was nobody. I had a tape. I used to have a tape machine. And I remember at the end of the evening, I used to sarcastically pull the tape out of the machine and go, ladies and gentlemen, the band! What? At that time, I didn't think, I never thought, I'm going to be a big star, you know, I'm going to take the world on, I'm going to be signed to a huge record label. Never in my wildest dreams. I never for 1 minute dreamed that I would end up sat here, say for instance, talking to Melvin Bragg on a South Bank show, ever. One fateful evening in Wigan Road Working Men's Club, and I can't remember the name of the guy who came over to me, but he popped over to me and he said, I tell you what, Russell, you've got a fantastic voice, lad, but I reckon I've heard a tune by Pavarotti that'd suit your voice right down to the ground. It's called Nasty Doormat. Have you heard of it? And of course, Nasty Doormat was Puccini's Nessun Dorma. So off I toddled and I learnt Nasty Doormat to the best of my ability at the time and discovered this big booming voice that I never knew I had. And the first time I performed it was probably again in a Wigan Working Men's Club. Was the first time that I ever received a standing ovation for anything.
Splendid.
But how did Russell Watson make the fairy tale leap from singing on the pitch at Old Trafford to being issued on a major record label? A fan sent a tape of Ness and Dormer to the Cliff Richard organisation, and they talked to their record subsidiary, who in their turn passed it on to a producer. They took it to Decca. Russell was summoned to HQ. He gave an impromptu performance in front of the board. They were convinced and requested talks on a deal immediately, just like that.
I felt that musically I'd turned a corner, and that was really when I maybe thought about taking some voice coaching, and people began to say, you know, you should get some coaching and so on, and I began to take some informal coaching lessons. I ended up with Sir William Haywood from Shrewsbury.